Hey, hey, what's up, Crown Nation? Welcome to Rock the Crown. We are going to give everybody a couple of minutes to come on in. Today has been a long day. Actually, it's been a long weekend and a long month and a long year. And so we're still kicking it in 2021, but it's a lot of long stuff happening, right? So we just want to, let's all take a deep breath, give a woosah. We have our beautiful red on today because we're going to be talking about love. And I'm sure you all saw the post and were maybe a little intrigued about what? Wait, what? So the topic tonight is about love, and we just want to kind of give it in a little bit of an interesting angle. And so I am your host, Naima. And of course, I have my queen with me, Nefertari.
Hey.
And so we have been rocking it for 2 weeks straight. It's just Neff and I. So this week, again, we're going to be doing it. And so, again, the topic is your ex may be the perfect fit for her. And I'm sure this is not only a controversial topic, but hopefully walking away, everybody will have learned something from a different perspective. I like to always say that, you can always present something, but it's how you present it that can kind of help people, see something from a little bit of a different angle in order to understand the message that we're trying to convey. And so, what we're doing tonight is. Uh-oh, Neff, you all right? That means yes. Okay, so let me go ahead and pull this up. We want to start this whole talk off with at least a couple of things. We want to first talk about marriage because you can't have an ex without having been married. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the we would say pitfalls that happens during marriage, and through those pitfalls sometimes you end up with an ex and sometimes you don't. But first, Nev, we want to welcome Crown Nation again. This is going to be such an interesting time, an interesting talk. But I know that personally, I'm married now, and I've been married my second time for 12 years, and of course my first time for 16. And so when I started thinking about the pitfalls and just kind of like what I've learned and what other people have learned, it's a lot. It's a lot to have learned. And of course, I am almost, I'll be 50 next year. And so, yeah, some of those pitfalls were not really explained ahead of time. So we want to make sure that we can kind of share some of those things with you all. And if you're going through some of these things currently, just kind of things to watch out for. And so we want to start off with the number one thing that marriages fail in, and it comes to money. Okay. So money is the number one pitfall when it comes to marriages. We all know, we've heard this so many times, and it really looks interesting now because we're coming from the perspective of women are making a lot of money now, right? And so you'll see where sociologically the things have kind of changed, where it used to be where the men were the breadwinners and the women stayed at home. Well, now it's like the women are the breadwinners, and for some households, men are staying home. And so the aspect of money can be kind of seen, couples can argue over money. And it is, of course, one of the most frequent and most serious cases as to why couples end up in divorce. And so the solution is to discuss these issues openly and consult within the family. So, Nev, did you ever feel like you had any money issues in your relationship?
Well, I don't feel like it in my previous relationship. Now, I think in my first marriage, I would say, I was really young, and we were kind of growing, and for me, it wasn't so much. We kind of like grew up with each other, so to speak. So it really wasn't that. I think more so my position when it came to money was, being that entrepreneur versus working, punching the time clock for someone and clocking in and saying, okay, I've got this real job with this real money flowing through kind of thing. And so for me, I was a hairstylist. I had my own salon. And, I just remember some of the confrontation being like, I was making pretty good money. So it's like the money was going out as fast as it was coming in. I remember even doing the construction on my new salon at the time. And I remember sometimes, I know this is a little bit different, but being made to feel like you don't have a real job, so to
Oh,
speak.
yeah.
And so it was kind of like more like that, but not necessarily money, but my money did kind of help take care of things and help make things go round, and then sometimes you get to, you have to kind of pull back. But I know that in a lot of relationships, sometimes it could be, she makes more money than I do. Some men are like, especially these days, they're like real cool with that. But there was a time in the past where sometimes it could be a little intimidating by some men and they don't really know how to respond to that, you know. So that was for me personally. But
Yeah.
I know for a lot of people now today, like I said, it's a little bit different.
Mhm.
I really would like to hear from the men tonight too on this part, because as
Right.
they are beginning to look for a mate, when you think about all of those little bullet points and what it is that I would like to have, a lot of our young men have on there a woman with a job making such and such, at least she could take care of herself and this and that. So they're like, you
Yeah,
got to
what
come
does
in and
that mean? She can take care of herself. This,
right.
I'm still kind of confused on that part, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And one of the
Yeah.
things also, one of the ways to also avoid arguments when it comes to money is to come up with a budget. So a budget tracks your expenses, your incomes, investments, establishes a framework for taking care of the family regularly. And
Right.
I know that in the 50s and 60s, they had home ec classes, right? Even in the 70s, like even when I was in high school, I went to home ec. And these are some of the things we kind of talked about. But now I know the millennials right now, they're not having these classes. And so without having had a
Right.
budget or understanding a budget, it's really difficult to be able to make sure that you understand the concept of money. So definitely want to make sure that
Hmm.
people are sharing or looking up, you know, teaching other people about budgets and money. I remember I worked in Muhammad schools as the senior when I was doing the senior teaching. And one of the things that I taught them in classes was how to make a budget. And so we were doing an exercise on how much money and how much interest you would have if you bought a car and how much would the down payment be. And those students, they're all adults now, but at the time they were like, what? 20% down, 10% down. That's how much? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, this is the real world. So like really teaching them and helping them to understand the concept of money is really, really important. So, some other pitfalls that we have in marriage are the in-laws. So, in-laws, they're often the focus of blame and reproach when there are marital disputes. But there are so many good ways to maintain good relationships with the in-laws, and some of those may be that never make an issue about me or them. So, just always thinking about keeping everything very level. The spouse always knows their parents better than the other spouse, and so just always making sure that everything is never an issue about me or them. um
Not
don't
trying to not trying to tell them how to improve their relationship, right?
Right. Right, because they know their parent, right? Like, I think I know my parent better than you, right? And remembering always to treat the in-laws with compassion. Like, I think here in America, that's something that's an issue because I think it's almost like taught that you should have an issue with your in-laws. And so what ends up happening is like people, as soon as they, oh, you're gonna get married, it's gonna be in-laws. Like we have all these monster in-law movies and things like that. But really it should
Hmm.
be taught that the in-laws are a positive influence for the family and that everybody can work together to really make the relationship great. And also between that, maintaining a balance between the spouses and between the needs of yourself and the in-laws. And there's a striking a balance. So, like, especially when you start having children, hey, we want to go visit the in-laws either here for different holidays and things like that. But yes, definitely striking a balance.
You gotta
What's some
gotta
other
split that time
in-law?
up, kind of even it out.
Yeah.
So this, like for example, we got Thanksgiving coming up this month.
Right.
Depending on the situation, you might have a lot of years where you're with this family.
Yes.
It's like we were with them the past 2 years, 3 years. Now it's time to, we need to see the other side. If you
Yes.
live close in the same state, then you might be able to do a pop in. This might be your primary spot, but do a pop in. So that is one of the things, just being able to give some balance. So not just holidays, but even just because, just going places, spending time, like you said, with the family. So
yeah. And then of course we're going to keep, there's so many other different tips, but remembering that also some of the pitfalls are parenting. We want to kind of speed it up a little bit, only because we really want to get to the X may be perfect for her. And so parenting, one solution that's going to start you off right when it comes to parenting is learn about Islamic parenting before having children. And let me just say this, what I know is that a lot of people really don't focus on learning about being a parent before they're a parent. And so what ends up happening is, they get so overwhelmed when they finally have the child. It's like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. But one thing that I know that I began to do, so my first marriage, we got married and I was like, let's have some kids, right? So 5 months later, I was pregnant. And while I, what to expect when you're expecting, I was reading that book. I had literally taken out subscriptions to parenting and all of these other magazines. And I just started reading tons and tons of stuff, obstacles, how to do all this other stuff, how to organize your house, how to be this way with your children and all this other stuff. So I felt more prepared when I did have all four of my children than had I not read ahead of time. But there's still a difference between parenting and Islamic parenting. Right.
So, and what is that?
What is that? So, of course, Islamic parenting. Go ahead, Nev.
Well, I was just going to say, of course, you have to start from Quran. What does Allah say? And Allah guides us in every way. All the answers are right there in the Quran. So starting from what Allah says first, we all, we want to make sure we put Allah first. And then you think about the hadith and the practices of our beloved prophet, Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him. And so we have, with those two examples, it's kind of like, you can't really go wrong. It's that good foundation. It's kind of hard for someone to argue with, this is what Allah says, this. And then this is an example that the prophet gave, peace and blessing be upon him, on how he dealt with certain situations. And so, you can't really argue with that. Now, when you talk about different perceptions of people and what they do and how they do, sometimes you kind of put a little different spin on it. But for the most part, if you're going with that, then you're gonna be going in the right direction. So whether that's parenting, relationships, whatever you have. So one of the other things about relationships that can be a factor is stress, right?
Well, I think that's forever, right?
Yeah. Stress can definitely be one of the causes. So we're just kind of talking about some of those things that can cause a little havoc in the marriage, that kind of make things go south, that, where you may or may not make it through. And so, we even have stress just even when you're by your own self. So when you put two people together, that's a whole nother thing. And so you just have to be able to learn each other and know each other and know when to kind of allow certain space, or, sometimes you just be like, hey, I'm just having one of them days, or I just need a minute, but stress between work, stuff at home, or just, especially being a mom, whether you got one or five, a lot of work to be done. And if you're a business owner on top of that, or you work in the office somewhere, it's just a lot of work, that you have to really kind of juggle to make sure everything, being a wife on top of that, of course, being able to juggle things. So same thing with the man. He goes out, works hard, trying to make a living for his family. That can be stressful in itself, sometimes. So just being able to come home and have some peace and feel relaxed and feel like you're in a safe place. And, it's just really important to be able to have that balance. So when that's not there, when that is absent, then, you kind of start to run into that. It may not be good for you, which is what we're going to get to, but maybe it
Right.
might be good for someone else.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's why we should always speak a word to the right. But as we're continuing on, domestic violence is also one of the factors of divorce. And we know that that is never anything, there's never a time where domestic violence is ever acceptable. And so when you're dealing with victims, perpetrators, and those concerned about, the family, then guess what? Make sure that you are seeking the help if you are the individual person that is a domestic violence victim, or if you have family and friends. Then you need to really be able to speak out. And I know that this is something that's very, very difficult for people. Sometimes you hear the saying, like, stay out of people's marriages. Sometimes when it comes to safety, this is not that time. This is not that time.
Exactly.
If you know that someone is being abused, physically abused, mentally abused, then this is the time kind of to step in. It used to be that, where we would say that the wali is there to protect the woman, even inside of the marriage. Well, somebody needs to go to that wali and say, hey, this is what's happening. We really, really have to be advocates for peace in marriages and not just always feel like people are trying to be in your business. But if you're not doing the right thing and you are abusing someone needs to step in. And it used to be in the Nation of Islam where they would step in and step out, and you would be
Handle
not
that.
in a good situation. Okay. It would be a whole bunch of brothers standing up on your porch. So we just want to make sure that we're advocating the right things as well.
And that's for men and women, because these days you got some women who might be tripping like that, but
Right.
a lot of times men don't need the necessarily the same protection as the woman needs.
Right.
They might, but there is something that's comforting about knowing that when a woman is in a certain situation, she know her brother's got her back.
Yeah.
I'm talking about community members. It's like when we talk about providing, maintaining, protecting, it's like, Allah put that thing in us where this is something that we desire. It's something, it's an expectation that we have,
right,
when it comes from our something that we expect to come from our men. When it's not there, it kind of turns you off a little bit.
right.
Like, what?
Right, that part. And it can also lead to what we would call, as another pitfall, spiritual incompatibility. Because if
Yes.
you're beating on a woman, or if you're getting beat on, or whatever the case may be, there is some spiritual incompatibility. There is no way that you can find yourself religiously grounded and abusing people. And so, here in America, we know that there's a lot of intolerance that can sometimes take place in marriages. But you really have to learn to communicate so there isn't any spiritual incompatibility. And some of the challenges that I think we have just as women in general, and this is kind of going to go into the X as well, is like when you start looking for this bad boy image, right? So we've been taught so many dichotomies that they just don't go together. It's like oxymoron. Like, you want a bad boy, but you want him to be an imam. That don't make any sense, ladies. Okay. You want somebody who's a thug, but yet you want him to treat you right, like a man and a gentleman.
Now, not on that level, but I will say this: as I hear you, it's almost like you want that gentleman, you want that guy that's gonna step up and be responsible and fill his role, but then you also you kind of do want that other side where he's like, he gonna handle it when he need to, like he ain't no punk, like it's that part of it,
Right.
It's not necessarily want him to be in the streets, but you just know, like, he ain't gonna be screaming louder than you.
Okay.
In certain situations, what I'm saying?
Part.
And so, like, yeah, just knowing that somebody got you, whether they got a piece or not,
Right. Okay, that part.
Somebody stepping in the wrong way, just kind of like how a woman is with her children. Like,
yes.
a woman to her children is like a bear to their cubs kind of thing. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you want your man to be the same way, which most men are.
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna be that protector of their families, their wife and their children is everything. Like, so
Right.
that's the part when you say that, like, it's a little bit, there's still a little bit of edgy side over there.
Right.
Like,
Right. The rare, as we would say in Islam, the rare. Right.
yeah, yeah.
Going back to this compatibility, I think that this is important because, again, when women are looking for spouses and or when men are looking for wives, it's important to know what level of spirituality you both are on in order to be able to, like, you don't want somebody who feels like they're like hadithing you down all day and night and you can't even get a word in edgewise, or you can't pick a fork up because you're getting hadith down, or you can't do anything because they're using the Quran as like a literal tool to like
Right.
subjugate you to not live a full and whole life. So just making
Yeah.
sure that you are on the same page spiritually, I think that that's very important, which
Mhm.
then leads to we had all kind
One
of
of the
different.
least talked about things, huh?
Right. One of the least talked about things is sexual dysfunction in relationships. This is that, like, people are like, oh, you can't divorce somebody because there's sexual dysfunction. Oh, well, yes, you can. And what you want to really try to focus on is not necessarily focusing on the sexual dysfunction, but this is one of the least talked about, but it's wreaking havoc across marriages. I've heard so many times that where women are saying, oh my goodness, my husband doesn't do this or he doesn't do that. It used to be where men were really, really active and women were really passive. Well, now women have become really, really active and men are really, really passive. And that it is actually very, and it is sunnah, right? That you please your spouse. And that really just takes courage and being responsible and humility to accept that I need to learn how to please my spouse. Just because you're a
Mhm.
man or just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you're going to please that other person. And it is really, you have a lifetime to do it. So, really focusing on making sure that those sexual dysfunctions don't happen, because as I often tell people is what the difference between needs and wants is that needs must be met, and the human
Mhm.
being does not predicate their life on, oh, you know what, this is first. No, your human needs always must be met first, and then your wants can be compromised. And so uh Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I said, dude, bro, I gotta put this up for Dr. Rabil. It's like, wait a minute now. Is this disturbing? She said it's disturbing. Okay. When you wait, you're trying to be religious and then you're not pleased. And this is and this is also important for
Ooh.
each of the persons to talk about ways in which they want to be pleased. And this is why it's important to
Mhm.
learn about your body. Um, it's no shame in any of that. But we have too many relationships and marriages that are really failing because of sexual
Mhm.
dysfunction. And because we're in a society here in America where everything is about sex, people really, 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 really focus on that instead of focusing on other things. So, one way to kind of, dissipate this is to making sure that we have knowledge about these specific things. And I know some people are probably going to send me nasty messages that we're talking about sex, and that we're Muslim women, but this is halal in Islam. Okay, so we can talk
Mhm.
about these things surface wise and still it can be lawful to do that. And just to understand that the marital relationship, this is something that is mandatory in the marital relationship. And we're gonna keep going. Some other functions. We're almost there. We're almost to the juicy part where you all want to really really talk about the juicy part. Um, but of course, the marital dysfunction. Then we go into intercultural marriages, which when you have different cultures coming together, that's a lot. It's a lot to not understand, even within our own culture as African
Mhm.
Americans. An African
Mhm.
American, even marrying an African, can sometimes cause
It's different.
dysfunction,
Yeah, it's
right?
different.
Yeah, just because we're the same color doesn't mean we understand the same things. Like even in the United States. So like, my husband and I'm I was born in New Mexico. He's from New Orleans, and he's always saying things like, "Hey, that's New Orleans. I'm not from New Orleans, so I don't know any of that, right?" So we're always talking about these things, but it's so funny because like, men in New Orleans, they love to cook, and I love to cook, right? So sometimes I'm like, you need to cook. Aren't you from New Orleans? Right? Sometimes
I like them beans
that
though,
he
them
does
red
both.
beans and that shrimp.
Okay, those beans be on, honey. But he cooks and all of these different things. But we share those responsibilities, and just over time, we've had to kind of like understand and learn each other's culture, even within America, because like growing up in Las Cruces, it was totally different than, of course, growing up in New Orleans, or even when I moved to Dallas, that's a different culture, even then from New Orleans. And so imagine it being across the waters or across in different countries. It can be like a whole nother thing that could be going on. And then something
And
else.
so then it wouldn't be necessarily just a matter of who's cooking what, but
Right.
even the type of food that you're cooking and the
Yeah.
palette you have for the different types of foods and places where you want to go and just things that you're interested in.
Yes.
So it's just
Because we
like,
cannot go anywhere
there's
where there's
no right or
curry.
wrong way.
Right. Because he doesn't like curry. So I have
No
to eat that
curry,
with my girlfriends.
huh?
No curry.
Well, you're gonna also have to learn how to make it for yourself. Just
That's
because that's one of the other things that we do often too, is that the things that we like, we end up after a while, it just disappears because we're
right.
doing things for everyone else. So
Right.
self love, make you some curry.
Okay, right. And then last thing we're going to kind of talk about is the lack of domestic skills. This is just kind of like a permeating thing. So, when we talk about domestic skills, of course it has changed over the last 22 decades, the last 2 decades, the last 20 years. Domestic skills are totally different. I have a friend who her her partner, he is a clean he's a clean freak. So he's literally like he's always cleaning up her entire apartment all day every day. She's just like, "Well, girl, the house is clean." Right? And so she's not very domestic like that. Not like she can't be. She just is so busy that she's just like, "Well, this is working for me." And so really understanding and coming to um a real
Agreement.
agreement on who is to do what, because I think that something else that has changed is that what used to be in terms of like women cooking and cleaning, that's kind of like not the same anymore, but just making sure that you understand what your relationship kind of needs, and what roles you will serve in your own house.
I would tell you a little bit about my house. So my husband actually, sometimes you hear about the hadith and how the prophet was and how he helped his wife around the house and how he helped do different things. And we hear that a lot of times come across in the cook by telling the brothers like, you could do some things to help and
Right.
maintain time or whatever. And so like with my husband, and we think about our 7-year-old, during the week, he'll get up because he's an early person. So he got the breakfast going, the bacon cooking, or the sausage cooking, and do some eggs and all of that. For me, I'm a night person. So I'm fixing the lunch at night, packing it all up. So in the morning, all you got to do is put it in a lunch box and go. So
Right.
it's have this little system where he cooks breakfast, I fix his lunch. I'm usually cooking dinner. And so, but we have like a nice little system where this is your part, this is my part, and then one of the others still needs to do the other thing, then we do. But it's kind of like one of
Right.
those things, whereas you may have another relationship where that guy might not be touching any of that. So I'm thankful that he's somebody that'll cook. When you talk about the other guy being real domestic, like now he's really good with that. But being a clean freak though, that's me.
Right.
Wipe it and put the top back on here and move that and do this and do that.
Right.
So that'll drive you crazy. So being compatible in an area where you just kind of can learn, but that's what we're talking about. Relationships that maybe necessarily don't work, that may not be good for you, but good for someone else. So
Right.
that's one of the things that sometimes can tear people apart.
Right. And so all those kind of things that we talked about, which can be pitfalls in marriage. Sometimes, you end up and the marriage doesn't work. And then you have this ex, right? And then what you start to notice is as you mature as a woman and, as you get older,
As you
sometimes
do.
we have this whole thing where, people love to claim somebody that they don't want anymore. Right. Well, he's my ex, but nobody else. If I can't have him, nobody can. Right. It's like, what kind of sense does that make? It doesn't make sense to me, but for some people that may make sense. Right. And then there's kind of like these labels that we start to put on all of these on the exes. Right. He's good for me and he's going to be that same person forever. And so guess what? I don't want anybody to have that. And so what we also sometimes do is we start to talk bad about that person to women, right? And so his ability to find someone else becomes very, very difficult. And then if he does find someone else, sometimes it's like a showdown. Like, women will spend so much time trying to figure out why he can't be with somebody else and you don't want him either. Right? But that person may be a perfect fit for him. I know that I've had some friends that I was like, you know what, this person wasn't great for me, but hey, I think they would have been great with so and so and so and so, and I would not have been sad or had any feelings about that at all. And then of course, we started talking about the time of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and how, during the transition and building community, there were brothers that were like, hey, I have 5 wives. Let me give you some, right? Let me give you one of my wives or whatever. And this was not something that was difficult for them to do. And so what I was telling Neff is like, the question is, us as Muslims, what are we doing? Are we really predicating our decisions on the Islamic law and the Islamic ruling of marriage, or are we falling into societal norms? And I would love for some of the brothers, if they would love to comment, if any of the brothers are watching, comment on your idea on, yeah, I think that if I had, and we know a lot of brothers now don't have a lot of wives, but if you had to take up a wife, maybe even after your wife passed away, or if your brother passed away and he had a wife, would you take your brother's wife after he's passed away, not while he's living, whatever. And all of these different concepts that we kind of don't think about in Islam, because it's not a social norm, because we live in a country where it's very Christian based, right? And so Neff, if you had a friend that was interested in your ex, what say you?
Well, it just kind of, depends on the situation. And so, I mean, with my ex, it's been so many years. But
Right,
my ex is
right,
married, so.
right, right, right.
But if I had a friend that wanted to talk to the ex, I think if it was earlier on, because one of the other things we have to be cautious about is because sometimes you can have an ex and then someone else is talking to that person, and if things don't work out well, they might think like, oh, and then it turns into that, well, you didn't tell me about this kind of thing. Why didn't you
Right.
share it with me? But that may not always be the situation. Sometimes, like you said, this may not have worked over here, but it'll work well over here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, I maybe can even use that as an example. Although my ex, my first husband, and I aren't together, and it's been 20 plus years now. But he's in a marriage where they've been, she's the person that he got with afterwards, and they're still together. And
Right,
so apparently it's working.
right,
And
right.
so he's a good person, but things didn't work out for us. So that's kind of an example of, it may not
Mm-hmm,
be for one, but it works for another.
mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know, like, a whole lot as far as being able to share a whole lot. We live in different places, different cities, or
Right.
whatnot. But I would just encourage, like, if it was that situation, try to point out some of those good things, because it had to be some good things about them
Right.
for you to end up with them. And,
Yeah.
ultimately, it's decisions that we make about,
Mhm.
for women, especially, like sometimes when you're in a relationship and it don't work, you really kind of get looked at like, you made that choice. And so, and we are making the choice, even though they're making the choice too, but we're making the choice. And I really feel like we kind of have a little the power, so to speak. It's like you're saying yes or you're saying no. You can
Right.
ask, but it's yes or it's no, and you
Right.
have to really kind of weigh out those things and not be blindsided to some of those things that sometimes maybe we are, which is why Wally is good.
Right.
And
Right.
there could be some times where you maybe have done all your homework. I know another time where everything was done and talking to people in the community and people at the masjid. And, I think we kind of mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, like, everybody, talks really good about this person because this is what you see on the outside. But ultimately,
Right.
you're really not going to know that much about a person until you live with them. We know the hadiths, live with
Right.
them, work with them,
Mhm.
play with them. But until you live with
Right.
them, you're really not going to
Right.
get that
Yeah.
whole thing about them. And so you just have to kind of like work with each other through that. But what would you say? What would you do?
I think I'm a little bit more liberal when it comes to these types of relationships, and I kind of
Mhm.
think of things a little bit different. And I know that I think of things differently. So I am not opposed to someone who is even a friend of mine being with an ex. I'm not opposed to that. So it's like, oh, okay, well, if that person works out for you, some of the things that I do think that we have to also think about, though, is like when you're thinking about your ex, there are certain things like, so the question is like, should you be friends with your ex still, or should you not be friends with your ex? And remembering that even though the two of you may not be together, there are some natural tendencies that still may happen, meaning not
Mhm.
like you're all are going to get together or anything, but there are natural chemistries that the two of you came together, like you were attracted to that person was attracted to you. Sometimes that doesn't necessarily go away, and just understanding those dynamics and making sure that you protect yourself against that as well.
Mhm.
Because sometimes people also kind of look at their ex in a very nostalgic way, and they forget the bad things about everything of why they're not together, and then they kind of start uh, really zoning in on, oh, the nostalgic type things. Well, y'all are not together anymore for a reason. And so just thinking about that and making sure that if you have a friend, I'm sure your friend has heard the stories because you were the ex, right? So if they've heard the stories and they're okay with that, then I think that you should just really be okay with allowing for them to find that person, because
Their
find
own
their
experience.
own self, yeah, their own selves with that specific person. Because again, there are different things that, like, even with our friendship, like we have four of us on Rock the Crown, but there's certain things that, like, when I'm hanging with you, there are certain aspects that you bring out in me. If I'm hanging out with Daia, there's certain aspects that, it's just the same thing with
Mhm.
men. So like, the
Mhm.
ex may not have been great for you, but there are certain aspects that another woman could actually bring out to make him a better person. And just really
Mhm.
focusing on, hey, you know what? Didn't work out for me. That's going to be great for you, girl. Go for it. But also making sure that if she comes to you, because sometimes women don't go to other women also. So like women are like, I'm
Mhm.
not about to tell her anything about him. That's going to be her problem. We really have to look at each other in a way where we kind of love one another. And this is where we start talking about love for your sister, what you love and want for yourself, right? And we use
Mhm.
this term so loosely, but really loving one another is that you really do care for another person, and you really want what's best for that other person. And sometimes that other person may be that ex. And so also thinking about these communities that we have across the United States, how big and or how small they are. And it's so sometimes if you have a small community, it's easy for for divorced couples to see that, hey, I might have to marry somebody else because they're in the community. So just thinking about the sacredness of community life. There is something about the sacredness of community life that we just really have to respect and understand. And that comes with understanding the X's, right? And I'm not saying
Mhm.
that everybody has to advocate for this, but specifically because we're having this conversation, this is what we're saying tonight. And so that would be my stance, that I'm okay with it. Because again, it's really about building stronger communities and making sure that you as an individual person grow within your own self. And, even if the relationship didn't work, what didn't you do to make that relationship work? And it's not always the other person who that is the one that's at fault.
Right, right. And when you talk about exes, you were talking earlier about, when do you cut ties like completely and why and when not? One of the reasons that, when you have an ex and you have to keep those ties are when you share children together. And so
Right.
you sure that you salvage that relationship enough where things you can co-parent without mess, because it's good
Right.
for children, and I
Yeah.
don't know, a lot of times that can be done, mostly that's done.
Right.
You hear about some things. It's unfortunate in relationships when it can't be done because it's really, turmoil for the children, and it's, you're developing them into being something that, they're going to have issues when they get older. So just trying to keep things at peace as much as possible, and being able to keep the relationship with the parenting, which as Muslims, even when the relationship doesn't work, we're taught to dissolve the marriage in peace, you know.
Right. Hmm.
So, not to try to have all of that commotion going on that we can see sometimes that happens. And so just leaving in peace, being able to leave in peace. And so when you share children, having that positive energy, that positive vibe, and them to be able to see that, hey, even though mommy and daddy weren't able to like be together, you can actually see them working together and know that that love that they have for the children can keep them connected in a way where it's like we can see the bigger picture here.
Right. And just even again, the love that we have to have for one another as Muslim women, as
Mhm.
sisters, as people in humanity, just a human being, right? And when we say love, there's a surface type of love, there's deep love and all these different things, but we know that there's just a love that we have for each other as human beings. Like, man, I
Mhm.
love that human being. When you see something that is positive, or you see something that is where people care for one another on a TV show or in real life, where people post videos, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so heart felt. That's really that is really the sunnah, right? So we really have to think about clearing our hearts and making sure that we are more in alignment with what Allah wants for us, and
Mhm.
what Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught us, and making sure that if you have that type of mindset, even if your ex does find someone else, it will be a harmonious transition, meaning that both parents really should focus on not only the children, but all the parents involved should really not necessarily, you don't have to be BFFs and all this other stuff. And we're not talking about all this peachy creamy stuff. We're just saying that focusing on raising the children is most beneficial. We know that this is very difficult. We know that this is not something that has happened. A lot of people do have difficulties, but this is when we really need to dig deep, look inside, and say, you know what? I think that I can learn something by just applying and seeking the knowledge that I need to be a better parent. And sometimes people don't want to be humble.
Mhm.
They don't want to have to really admit that, hey, I'm being stanky with this other person, which is
Yeah.
affecting the children. And so it's like, don't be
Mhm.
stinky, right? Just really,
Mhm.
really, really focus on what's going to be best for the parents and the community. So, Najma was saying that both parents are to be on the same accord when parenting and or co-parenting when it comes to the raising of the children, inshallah. And of course, we would love for that to happen. But if it doesn't, always remember that you are writing your own book, and how you show up is how people see you. So if you continue to hear people say, man, this person is such and such and such, it's not that people are saying it to each other, it's that you are mimicking that for people to continue to say the same thing over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So remembering that we are a mirror for each other and that we are sometimes saying things in order for other people to be able to listen and to make those changes. And one thing about adulting is that you have to make the necessary changes. And so I'm imploring that, hey, you got an ex. We have friends that need to be married, right?
We
So,
do. Yeah.
right. So if he wasn't great for you, but you know that he still has great quality, I'm not saying get your ex and hook him up with a sister you don't like. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying if you have an ex and he still has great qualities, it wasn't for you. It is not, it should not be anything against you recommending that brother to other sisters in the community. This is how we build community in, you know what beautiful thing flourished from that relationship. And it's a lot of sisters that need to be married, and it's
So
some brothers. Go
now,
ahead.
one thing comes to my mind that we hadn't really touched on as much. Like, when you're in a relationship and the husband is like, he's taking care of his family, but he's thinking about if something happens to me where I die, and they're thinking about how their wife will be taken care of after they're
Right.
gone.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've heard of arrangements being made where he might be like, have somebody in mind. It'd be like, if something happens to me, then, I want you to marry my wife. I want you to
Right.
take care of her and do this,
Right.
and that. And, a lot of
I've
times,
heard of that
you
too.
say that, and it's kind of like, how do women really feel about that? Like,
Right. Right.
are you like, yeah, he's really, are you looking at it like he's really trying to take care of me and make sure I'm good even after he's gone? Or do you have this kind of feeling of, how you gonna just choose somebody for me?
Well, I mean, I do respect
Oh,
men who, right. I
sure.
do respect men that have thought about it. Like, for a man to think of another man to say, if something happens to me, I would love for you to take on my wife. That to me it means that not only does he care for himself, but he cares enough even for his Muslim brother that he would want that brother to be with his wife, meaning that the character of that man has to be so great, because it's hard sometimes for men to see themselves or see their wives with someone else.
Another man.
And so when another man thinks of another man, it's like, hey, if I'm not in the position, I would love for you to take my wife on. That's beautiful. To me, it's beautiful, right? But then, from the perspective of the wife, she's like, wait a minute now, don't be trying to hook me up with people I don't want to be
I need to
with.
be able to make, we talked earlier about them choices. You need to be able to make
Right.
that choice. No, but like you said, it's definitely a good gesture, to be able to see that. It kind of makes you feel like, okay, it's kind of a good feeling. But in the end, it's like the choice is still yours. It's not like something you just have to do if it's not something that you're comfortable with.
Right. Exactly. But again, remembering that first thing we want to focus on is the marriage. The marriage, not having the exes. But if we do have circumstances where we do have the exes, then just really, really making sure that we have a clear heart, a clear mind, that we're able to understand what our relationship should be with our exes, and if those exes should be with other people within the community. Because again, some people are like, he better not marry anybody in this city. What are you talking about? That makes absolutely no sense to me. It may make some sense to other people, but we have to also guard what Allah would have us guard, right? And remembering that these people are not they don't belong to us. They belong to Allah. So hopefully we will see some more positive synergy coming in the community, where the ex may be a perfect fit for her, meaning someone in the community, because we want to build community, and we don't want to see ourselves kind of stuck in these positions of somebody better not. Right. So hopefully everyone, Rabia said that doesn't mean that the women will want him. I know that's real, right? She doesn't believe in arranged marriages, by the way. Dr. Rabia's like, yeah, girl, no arranged marriages. And Dr. Rabia, speaking of arranged marriages, I'm okay with arranged marriages, right? So there's so many TV shows that are going on right now, and people think it's funny and they're entertaining and things. Those are arranged marriages. Right? So we have, what's that one TV show? Married at First Sight.
Oh,
So like
yeah.
you get married based on the compatibility and things like that. I really found that show to be extremely interesting, of course, because they match the couples based on the compatibility. But then when you get the couples married and they see each other for the first time and they have to go through all of this, it's really, really
Changes.
changes, honey. But it's kind of the same dynamic as if you're meeting someone. Once you really have to be with someone, and again, Nefertari, what you were saying earlier is living with that person is a whole nother situation. Like, yeah, you didn't know that brother snored. Yeah, you didn't know that he does this, and oh yeah, you didn't know the sister really didn't comb her hair as often as you thought she did, right?
What is that?
Right, all of these different things, and so this is really where between the couple, inshallah. But I know that we've kind of talked, you all talk your heads off tonight, but hopefully you'll go back, you've learned something, you've heard something that you can share with other people, and just thinking about, again, your ex may be a perfect fit for her, and your ex may be a perfect fit for him. So either way, just thinking about how we build community and what we should do in that building. But again, I am imploring each of you to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to us on YouTube. And hopefully next week we'll have another topic that you would be more than willing to join us for. I'm going to say peace out. Nefertari, you have any final words before we close out?
No, I'm good. I think you said it all. You wrapped it up. So
Wrapping it up.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you being here. We've been going live every week this season, and we really like the interaction with the crowd. And so we'll just say to our Crown Nation to keep coming back.
Keep coming back. We'll see you all next week. Peace out, Crown Nation. Have a great week.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.